In this session, we're going to look at how to fill in the application in specific to calculations required for the application 3508, the SBA form 3408. Alright, so this is the main application form here. You go ahead and fill in all the basic information: employee at the time of loan application, employees at the time of forgiveness application, the EIDL loan received, the payroll schedule, the covered period. So we did look at what a covered period is. An alternative covered period. Alternative covered period is applicable only for bi-weekly or lower frequent employers. So you could take a look at one of the previous sessions we had. Now this is the main calculation here. So we have 11 lines here. So we need to look at that. And then we also, some of the information here is coming from Schedule A as well as Schedule A worksheet. So Schedule A worksheet would be used to get information for Schedule A, and information from Schedule A is brought into the main application here. So we have a spreadsheet here which we could use for this purpose. So this spreadsheet has 4 tabs in it. So this is the main application, and there is Schedule A, Schedule A worksheet, and the owner's comp worksheet. So some of the line items here has reference to Schedule A, and some of the items here has reference to the worksheet. Some of the items you would be entering it here directly. So all the items here which is in gray, the fields in gray is automatically calculated, and the ones in blue are the ones you need to enter information. So we understand for the main application, Schedule A needs to be completed, and for Schedule A to be completed, we need to be completing worksheet A. And of course, so this amount for the owner's comp cannot exceed 15,385, which is again equivalent to calculating it at $100,000 per year for the 8 weeks period. Now let's look at the Schedule A worksheet. All right, so there's Table 1 and Table 2. So Table 1 is, firstly, all the employees' residents have to be in the United States, and that's the same here for Table 2 as well. And here we're looking at received compensation from the borrower at an annualized rate of less than $100,000 for all pay periods in 2019, or were employed by the borrower at any point in 2019. We're not employed by the borrower in 2019. So we're looking at employees who received less than $100,000, okay, and all the new employees in 2020 in this table here. And here we're going to list all the employees whose annualized rate of salary was more than $100,000 for any period in 2019. All right, so that's what we're entering here. And here we have the name of the employee, the identifier number, which is the last 4 of social, and this is the covered period or the alternative covered period, and we're looking at what was the compensation paid during that period. Okay, and we have to do the average FTE, full-time employee equivalent calculation, which is like based on the 40 hours which we discussed in the previous video. And this is if there were any reduction in the salaries. Okay, and the reduction, we had a period against which we look at, and the period is basically from January 1st to March 31st. The annual rate at which they received the salary should be the same as they received in the covered period. So if it is less than that in the covered period, then that information, that amount is entered as a wage reduction. Okay, and you know that if it is more than 25% reduction, that does impact the forgiveness, the loan forgiveness. Okay, now here we are entering a maximum of the 15,385 based on the 100,000 calculation, so there is no question of reduction here as such. All right, now as you could see, all these are identified as box 1, which is the compensation, box 2, which is the full-time employee equivalent, and this is box 3, the reduction in wages. Box 4 is the table 2 employees covered compensation. Box 5 is the average full-time employee from table 2. Okay, now here we are going to look at the safe harbor for FTEs. As I was mentioning, if you had employees as of June 30th 2020 as the same as the covered period, right, so then you would be considered as exempt, or from the FTE reduction. The loan forgiveness would not be reduced based on the full-time employee reduction, because you did make good the full-time employees as of June 30th 2020. All right, so that's how we come up with the reduction safe harbor for FTE, and we looked at the salary reduction. Now let's move on to the Schedule A itself here. Okay, so we're looking at enter cash compensation, Schedule A worksheet table 1, right? And this is box 1. We did see there are 5 different boxes in the worksheet, and this is the average full-time employee from box 2, so that's coming from box 2 here, right? And then we have wage reduction from box 3, so wage reduction from box 3 here. Now if you look at, so all these are in gray, so which means it automatically comes in here. Now this is important here. So if the reduction, okay, this is the safe harbor for the salary reduction. If the average annual salary or hourly wage for each employee listed in the PPP Schedule A worksheet during the covered period, alternative payroll covered period, was at least 75% of each employee's average annual salary as compared to the period January 1st 2020 to March 31st 2020, then you just check mark here, and then you don't enter anything here. You would enter basically 0. Okay, so even though our calculation came up with a reduction, if it does not, the reduction does not exceed more than 25%, or the salary was at least 75%, then you would just check mark here and then just enter 0 here. Now this is coming from table 2 right here. Okay, and so we have box 4, the compensation and the full-time employee equivalent, so that's what's coming here and here, so that's automatically coming in from there. And now we're going to look at non-cash compensation payroll cost during the covered period, alternative covered period. So this is besides the compensation. So you may want to look at the definition of compensation itself. If you look at the form 3508, and if you just do a search for compensation, you could read what is included in the compensation. Now these are other than compensation, like the health insurance, retirement, employer contributions towards the health insurance, employer contributions towards retirement plan, employer, state and local taxes assessed on each employee. All right, so these are the amounts. And then you could see compensation to owners. As I mentioned, this comes in from our separate worksheet here. It goes in here. The amount may not be included in PPP Schedule A worksheet table or 1 or 2 if there is more than one individual included. Attach a separate table that lists the names of and payments are for each. So basically, if there's more than one owner, then there is no separate worksheet in the application, so you just need to go ahead and attach a worksheet which shows those owners and the wages or salaries paid. So total payroll cost. Now you're adding up lines 1, 4, 6, 7, 8, and 9. So 1, 4, 6, 7, 8, and 9. So all these lines are added so that we get the total payroll cost. Now, as you could see, this total payroll cost does go into our main application. Okay, now a couple of other items to look at here. So full-time equivalency reduction calculation. So if there were no reduction in number of employees or the average paid hours of your employees between January 1st 2020 and the end of the covered period, then you can skip these calculations. Okay, so you can skip lines 11 and 12 and enter 1 on line 13. Enter 1 on line 13. All right, so what does these calculations do here. So reference period for full-time employee denominator. Okay, so this is going to be used to see how much of the loan would be forgiven. So the average number of full-time employees on payroll per month employed by the borrower between February 15, 2019 and June 30th, 2019. Okay. Option 2 is the average number of full-time employees on the payroll per month employed by the borrower between January 1st, 2020 and February 29, 2020. All right. So average full-time employee during the borrower's chosen reference period will be the smaller of these two. Okay, option 1 or 2. Now let's see how all this plays into our main application form, right? Now before that, let's also look at total average full-time employee during the covered period. Okay, so what are the covered periods? So this is coming from our boxes here. So box 3, box 2, and box 5. All right, so this is coming from lines 2 and 5. Lines 2 and 5, this is line 2 and line 5. Okay, so they're totally 5. All right, so with this calculation here and looking at the ratio here, we are getting FTE reduction quotient of 0.5. All right, so now let's go to the main form and see how this all plays out. All right, so we're looking at payroll costs, and this is coming from Schedule A, line 10. We did see that line 10. We did see the total payroll costs, right? That includes all these here. Now these are entered directly by us, which is mortgage interest payments, rent or lease payments, utilities payments. All these are non-payroll costs. All right. So let's look at the adjustments from full-time equivalency or salary hourly wage reductions. Okay, so this is the total salary hourly wage reduction, and this is coming from Schedule A, line 3. Schedule A, line 3. Remember, we had this safe harbor exception here. If it does not exceed the 25% reduction, then it would be 0. So if it was 0, then it would be 0 here as well. Add the amounts on line 1, 2, 3, and 4. So we're looking at 1, 2, 3, 4, which is our total amount of cost, which is payroll and non-payroll cost we had incurred during the period. Okay, so that is this FTE reduction quotient, and this is coming from our calculation here from the full-time employee equivalent reduction, right? And this is if safe harbor is not met. Okay, so we did discuss about what does FTE safe harbor mean in a separate video. Let's take a look at it. So if a safe harbor is met, then it is going to be 1. So let's say if it was 1 here, then pretty much all your costs to this extent, all that you incurred, 145,000 would be forgiven. Okay, now let us look at, in this instance it's only 50%. Okay, 50% of the total cost you incurred. So if you look at line 8 here, potential forgiveness amount, modified total, multiply line 6 by line 7. So line 6, this is the total cost, payroll and non-payroll, and since there was a reduction in the full-time employees, we are taking only half or whatever quotient that is. So 50%, 0.5 of this amount is what is potentially forgivable, right? And this is the total PPP loan you received. And so this line here, payroll cost 75% requirement. Okay, so we're looking at if the payroll amount was supposed to be 75% of this amount, right? This is the total payroll cost. So for payroll cost 75% requirement, we are looking at line 1 is to be divided by 0.75 to see if at least 75% forgiveness requirement was met. Okay, now the next item here is to see which of these are the least. So we have modified amount here, which is 72K, and this is the total loan received, and this is a 75% requirement. So the least of these is what is going to be forgiven. So 72,577 is going to be forgiven, and the remaining amount would be considered as a loan, which is a loan for 24 months, and the first 6 months is going to be covered by SBA. And for the remainder 18 months, you'd go ahead and pay, with an interest rate of 1%. So to summarize, yes, we're going to be filling in application SBA 3508, and the main application follows with Schedule A, and Schedule A as a worksheet for Schedule A. And then of course you need to separately calculate the owner's comp, and all this then goes into our application here. So we're looking at the application. This is the main form here, main application. So do all the math in the worksheet, and then go ahead and enter them into this worksheet, into the application. And you need to self-certify, all these. You can go through each of them, sign off, and this is again instruction to Schedule A, and then this is the Schedule A itself, which we did see in our worksheet. And then of course we have the Schedule A worksheet instruction here. This is what I was talking about, cash compensation. You'd be looking at average FTE employee, salary reduction, and then of course we have the safe harbor here, and then FTE reduction exemption. If somebody were to be removed from employment because they were fired for cause, voluntarily resigned, voluntarily requested, and those are considered as exception in the FTE reduction requirement, full-time employee reduction requirement. And then there's also the FTE safe harbor, which is basically as long as these conditions are met, then you pretty much have the safe harbor. So you would go ahead and enter 1 in our calculation here, right? Enter 1 in our calculation here. So that would give you the full factor impact here, right? And then these are the worksheets which needs to be filled in. All right, this is a safe harbor for FTE. All right, I guess we have gone deep enough for you to understand how to fill in this application. So if you still have any questions, do give us a call and we would be happy to assist you. Thank you very much.